Hello, and welcome again to Justified Jewel Podcast. I'm your host, and my name is Joanne Cox. I would like for you to know everything there is to know about Justified Jewel Podcast, but I'm not going to get into that. I'll unpack that another day. But on Justified Jewel Podcast, we go through so many different topics. It can be spirituality, it can be emotional, mental well-being, physical health, or social awareness. But we're wanting to enlighten you, our viewers and listeners, as to something that will be a nugget that will make you want to be a better person. So today, for our topic today, it is really broad, but I know our guest is going to bring it home. And it is the importance of building a strong foundation. Today we have Ms. Katherine Rettig. Katherine, what would you like the viewers to know about you?
Thank you so much for having me on today, Joanne. I really appreciate the opportunity. As Joanne said, my name is Katherine Rettig. All my family and friends call me Katie, though, so you're welcome to do the same. When Joanne asked me to be on today's podcast, it was because of our relationship from Toastmasters. So one thing to know about me is that I am a Toastmaster. I work as an academic advisor and an adjunct economics faculty member at Fayetteville Technical Community College. Those we're talking about foundations, maybe it's important for me to back up a little bit more. I'm a Catholic and my faith plays a huge role in my life. I'm a former homeschool child who came back to the community in which I was raised to be able to contribute at the community college level. I enjoy learning about natural health and wellness, public speaking, playing board and strategy games, reading and collecting too many books, learning, going to school, and spending quality time with family and friends. A good conversation is my favorite way to spend an evening.
Yes. And I want to start out with spirituality. And in spirituality, there has to be a very strong foundation. So I want to see both sides. What does it look like, Katie, when you have a strong spiritual foundation versus when that foundation can be fractured or just built on poor material? You start on which side on building a strong spiritual foundation?
Oh, I think that's just such a loaded question. And I feel like there's so much to unpack here because the world has one view of what it means to have a strong foundation. Yes. Some people think that, oh, if you're a Christian, you're always happy all the time, or your life works out in every way. You have material possessions or you have successes in life. But that's really not what a strong Christian foundation looks like, because that's not what the Bible says we're going to have anyway. But it says we're not going to be happy all the time, but we're going to have joy. If you can tell someone has a strong Christian foundation by the fact that they have joy, which doesn't mean that they're happy all the time. Joy is something that lasts so much longer and so much deeper than happiness. And there's someone who has a peace, even when things go wrong. Because we know things are going to go wrong. Because if you look at what happened to God's only son, things definitely went wrong here in his earthly life for our sake. So a good spiritual foundation is having that joy, having that peace, and having that trust, knowing that we're following in his footsteps as we carry our cross. It's those people who can keep going even when the cross gets heavy that have that strong foundation.
Yes. And I like to use the word bounceability because we all fall down at some time, but it's that inner peace and joy, as you mentioned, that we can just get back up again and start all over again. But my thing is what I really want to hear, and that's, Katie, in that spiritual foundation, what is it that makes it strong? I want to lead you in on saying, knowing the word biblically. Those words can give us a strong foundation. Now, can you lead our audience in the direction of how important it is to have that word within?
Oh, absolutely. Because if you don't have the biblical foundation, you don't have a rock on which to stand. The Bible is amazing in the sense of it's for all people at all times in all places. Because yes, it's a historical book, but it's also so much more than that. Because how many times have we picked up the Bible and read it and said, wow, that was exactly what I needed right at this moment, right at this time, because the word of God is present and effective and living. It's a living text. So it's just as applicable today as it was then. It's so important that we plug into a good Christian community so that we have a community of believers, because sometimes it is hard to be a Christian, to be in the world, because we all face trials and tribulations. And Jesus had his 12 apostles around him, and we need to surround ourselves with our 12 or whatever your number is. Find yourself a good church community with those people who will be there when you are confused, when you're lonely, when you need someone to remind you of the foundation that you have by looking at their foundation and looking at their example. We look back to the saints, the martyrs, the people from the early church as our foundation as well, their example to lead us and guide us. And maybe they didn't have the Bible yet, but they were living those Bible stories, which were soon to be written for us to keep moving forward and to keep being grounded. We have to keep going back on our good days and on our bad days. What is our joy? Who is our hope? And keep going back to that word.
Very well said. And sometimes when we hear the word foundation, we immediately can think about a home, a house, and we want to get those good materials, because we can always get the downgraded version because we're trying to save money. But when we have a strong foundation, we want to get the best materials that we can get so that we can withstand the turbulence of life. But I'm going to move to relationships. There are different types of relationships. There can be romantic relationships, relationships between children and their parents, relationships within your community of your job, outside, inside. So tell me, how do you start building intentionally a strong foundation when it comes to relationships?
Relationships, like you said, it is so broad because people are in our lives for different reasons and for different seasons. And some of them will just be passing friendships with coworkers or maybe acquaintances. But I don't think that's the friendship that we're talking about here today. I think we're talking about something that's deep and something that's lasting. And we have to make those relationships on a foundation that's very similar to the foundation of our faith in terms of principles. There has to be open communication and trust, just like the Lord communicates with us and we trust him completely. If we don't have communication and trust in our relationships, it's difficult for them to grow. We need to have vulnerability as well. And of course, that grows over time as we get to know the person and spend more time with them. But if our relationship is based on something quick and fleeting, like, a similar interest, or maybe we just saw each other at a similar club, that's a great way to start a relationship, but it's not going to last if it's just based on liking the same TV show. We have to go deeper and learn to accept the person for who they are. When someone accepts you for who you are, you found a true friend. But that friend, just like on a Christian journey, will push you to grow to be a better person gently, sometimes leading by example, sometimes calling you out if that's necessary. Yes. But without that foundation of trust and vulnerability of communication, your friendships will be surface level, which is fun for a while. And sure, some friendships will maybe stay there because some people are just meant to be acquaintances. But you're not going to be happy without those deep and lasting friendships.
Now, I truly believe that we model our relationships on patterns that we don't even realize we're picking up on when we're very young, like kids. Excuse my voice. So I would like to ask you, how did you pick up on forming that unconditional relationship with someone, whether it's unconditional love, unconditional respect, accepting them for who they are? Did that just come about in your life, or did you see that around you?
Growing up, I saw some relationships that were so successful and some that were such failures. My parents are divorced, so I think that factored in some of my relationships. And also some relationships, I quickly divorced relationship from people who provide material goods or people who provide money, because I quickly found that the people who loved me the most and were willing to spend the most time with me were necessarily not the ones with material possessions or goods to offer. So from a very young age, I disassociated presence from love because because you don't need gifts to be able to demonstrate love. Sure, that's a love language, but that was to me more of a way of buying my love, because maybe my father would bring a present now and then, but he wasn't present in my life. Whereas my mother, who was 100% present in my life, gave up her career, really. She could have gone back to work full time, but she chose to work a home-based business and be able to homeschool me and to pour into me. So while there maybe weren't as many material possessions there, I saw someone who was vulnerable, willing to give of herself, didn't care what the world judged her in terms of our material goods or her career or what she was doing with her life, because she wanted to pour it into me as her child. So I saw successful relationships, and then I saw relationships that maybe weren't quite so successful in terms of building them with people because they weren't willing to give of themselves.
Yes, it sounds like you saw both ends of the spectrum there. And that's a very true and learning process when you don't just see all good. It is so necessary in our lives and on our journeys to be able to see it from different perspectives. And it seems like that is what you build your relationships on by what you were seeing at a very young age. Now, we all, again, just like in our spirituality, we're going to have the peaks and the valleys. Now, in romantic relationships, what are some of the signs that we can see? Some people call them red flags. I call them maybe a fracture. So how do we look for those, or should we be looking for them? Or how can I identify that this is going to need some mending?
This is actually one of my favorite topics in terms of the different types of love in a romantic relationship. Full disclosure, single at the moment, but I think I have a little bit of an understanding just based on some things in my past and from observing other people's relationships there. Because there's so many different meanings of the word love. Because our romantic relationships often start out with the Greek form of love known as eros, which is that initial attraction. You're falling for someone. It's romantic. It's beautiful. Everything is wonderful. And that's okay in the beginning, and it's okay for it to continue, but it can't be your only foundation. If that's the only time you're engaged with that person is when you're doing something romantic together, probably not enough there. You've got to keep going deeper. The next level down is what the Greeks would consider philios, which is the love of a brother or the love of a friend. You have to genuinely enjoy spending time with that person as you would with a friend, because they should be your best friend in terms of walking with you through life. The good, the bad, the mundane, everything from, washing the dishes after you make a meal to going out and doing something fun. But if that person isn't willing to sacrifice for you, that's when you have a major red flag as a relationship. If it progresses to where it would be considered serious, and that person isn't willing to put your welfare above their own, which is the Greek form of love known as agape, which is the deepest self-sacrificial love, you have a problem. And your relationship simply isn't going to last if that person isn't willing to say, I love you so much that I'm willing to put your good over mine.
Why is this not taught in school, like in high school? I really think we need to know this language so that we don't get swept off our feet with gifts, as you've said, from the past, that sometimes it's someone's love language, but to know the difference between, is that their love language, or are they simply trying to buy your affection? And I'm going to go into another topic, but I just want the viewers to know right now, because I can see the passion she has for those relationship topics. We're bringing her back on, and we're just going to have a topic just on relationships, because I think we can just fill up that entire podcast just on relationships. But now to get into another type of foundation, and that's well-rounded mentally. And we don't talk about that. And sometimes we don't even know where the mental and physical starts and stops. Now, how can I know that I'm mentally strong with a foundation that I'll be in my well-being, Katie?
Absolutely love that you said you don't know where mental and physical stop and start, because I'm not sure they really do. Because what we believe in our minds has a physical impact on our bodies, and how we treat our bodies, because the mind, it is a physical organ. It impacts the emotions. The emotions and physical well-being are so completely tied together. This is going to sound crazy, but there was a study that came out about how we speak or how we pray or how we speak about our food can actually change the molecular structure. which sounds insane. I have a dear friend who, when we're eating junk food, she said, "Oh, it's all right. I prayed over it. It'll be okay." And I'm like, "Okay, really?" Or like, "Is that thing, are you sure that thing's still good? It's been, in your fridge for a little while." She's like, "Oh, I prayed over it. It's fine." She may be onto something, because there was actually a scientific study that if you say mean and hateful and negative things to your water, it changes the molecular structure and the water is disrupted. So if we are grateful and happy and speak prayers and life over our food, it actually has an influence on how it feeds us. I'm slightly off topic here in terms of the physical connecting to the mental, but what we believe about ourselves and what we do has an impact in both ways.
Now, I'm probably taking this the wrong way because, see, I'm a junk food junkie. And what I was actually hearing, what I wanted to hear, and that if I get a whole different perspective as I eat those chocolate covered donuts, I'm going to be just fine because I'm going to say great things. I don't think that's what Katie was saying. But just for right now, I'm going to just let that soak in for a while. Okay. We know that socially, it means so much to get along with others. We have the parties, we have just different meetings, but they're still called social environments that we want to get along and we want to be in touch. But that's another thing that I think we need to have taught in school, how to get along with others outside of work, church, and at home. So now you're in this group, in this party. Do I want to come off irrational? Do I want to come off as I know it all, or I just think I'm all that? What is it that would be, what do I want to ask you? What would be not appealing in a social environment if I don't have a good background in my foundation for social awareness?
No, that's a funny question for me, because I actually am terrified of large social environments. We're walking into the room where I know no one. I think part of that is the fact that I do have some of the similar worries that you mentioned of what are people going to think or how are they going to perceive me. And those of us who come off, without that firm foundation in the social situation, oftentimes do overcompensate because we're not secure in ourselves. We're not secure in our identity as children of God. We're not secure in what He has given us and blessed us with. And we do come off either cocky in terms of trying to brag about our own accomplishments, or maybe too quiet in terms of not being friendly or standoffish because we're not confident in what we bring to the table. A great way to kind of break the ice oftentimes is to ask other people questions about themselves. And then you can respond and share similar experiences or maybe learn something about them. But it's super difficult to come off in an incorrect way if you have the right foundation and you're confident in it, because then you value other people for who they are and value yourself for who you are. And know that wherever the conversation leads, maybe you'll be listening, maybe you'll be contributing, depending on the topic, but you can still be an active participant rather than having those self-doubts and that self-reflection that's negative, which just comes off as either you being standoffish or too cocky.
Wow. Katie, do you have a book in the making?
Oh, gracious, no, I am not a writer. I tried to do that. And I said, no, I do not have the creativity for that skill set. I leave that to others and learn from them.
Sometimes it's not about that creativity. It's just about what you already know and the way you present yourself. Because I only have one more topic I want to cover, and I slice that between mental and physical. So I myself personally want to have a strong foundation in my physical life, physically, body. What do I need to do? Because I'm not consistent. I'm not stable. I don't have a foundation. Please help me.
Ironically, this is the foundation where I personally am the worst. I'm blessed to have a strong spiritual foundation, some wonderful relationships, good mental health, for being surrounded with wonderful people, but the physical is hard. And that is where I also need to improve as well. And I think the biggest thing there is going to be consistency. just like it's consistency in praying every day, in reading the word, in putting time and effort into your friendships and your relationships, whether it's texting people, reaching out to them, saying hi in the hallway. It's the same thing in the physical. It's one step at a time. It's one salad at a time. It's one walk at a time. And maybe it's finding what your niche is. I do not run. If I'm running, the world is ending. We don't even want to go there. But I love taking walks outside. So we finally reached my time of year where I can go to the park and just enjoy myself and be in nature. And it helps my mental health as well, because being out in there in the woods, and the Japanese have a word for it. I think it's Shinrin Yoku, where you do forest bathing, or if you're just being out in nature and letting that calm and peace wash over you. So if I can get more than one piece of my health done at the same time, I'm more likely to focus on my physical health. If I can go with a friend and focus on my relationship health, or a family member so we can have a good conversation, or being outside in a nice place to focus on my mental health, or if it's with people from church, focusing on my spiritual health. But I have to put something with that physical health to be able to motivate myself to do that one properly.
It sounds like you're telling me that I need to be involved in a community, whatever it takes, that if I know that works for me, then that's my beginning baby step, or being consistent and persistent in getting this act together. So that is what I think that I should do. So listeners, I'm hoping that you will pick up on some of these things. Now, this has been a very short podcast, but we had some technical difficulties starting out. But I would like to ask Katie if she would come back and do a part 2 on this same topic. Would you be willing to do that, Katie?
Oh, absolutely. This has been a very enjoyable experience. It's actually my first time on a podcast.
And we are going to cover the same topic with all the same intricate parts, but she's going to be able to express herself in a little bit more detail. Now, I was taking notes just in case you didn't realize when I was looking down, but I want you to go back through with the spirituality, emotionally, physically, mentally, socially, and find out what it is that you want to do to be enlightened, so that you will be able to pass this information on to others. And when we shine in our one spot, we make the whole universe a different and more pleasant place to be in. So I want to say, before I ask Katie her last words, this is Joanne Cox with Justified Jewel Podcast. You can find me on my website at www.Justified Jewel Podcast, and on any of the social media platforms. You will find this particular one on YouTube, and be looking out for this wonderful lady. So Katie, in closing, what would you like the viewers to hear?
I want to piggyback about what you said about community, because community is vitally important. I think we learned a little bit more about that in the COVID-19 pandemic. And maybe it's just as I'm getting older that I'm realizing the importance of community. But find a place where you plug in, somewhere that you're fed spiritually, somewhere where your relationships are nourished, somewhere where you're fed mentally. For example, where I met Joanne in Toastmasters. Toastmasters has become one of my communities where I have made friends for people in completely different departments in my office, people who work outside of Fayetteville Tech. And those people have become part of nourishing me mentally, spiritually, and in relationships. So find your community that shares the same beliefs, at least on a somewhat fundamental level that you do, because they'll have the same foundation as you to help you build and grow. You become a better person, they become a better person, and it's fun along the way.
Okay. Again, thank you for tuning in. And there's a new podcast on every Tuesday, and it comes out at 8:00 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So bring a friend next time. And until then, have a great day. This is Justified Jewel Podcast.